I think this election is extraordinarily important because the right way of immigrating to the United States has been closed off. The Remain in Mexico policy is also known as the Migrant Protection Protocols. It's a system of reviewing asylum claims that was implemented by the government to keep asylum seekers in another country, basically in Mexico. So asylum it's a legal form of protection that the United States provides under international law, actually, and it says that if someone comes from another country and they're afraid to go back to their country because they're going to be harmed on account of one of 5 protected grounds, their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular group, then they can come to the United States and be given this type of legal protection so that they're not sent back to the country where they're going to be harmed or killed. However, with this Migrant Protection Protocol, it is extraordinarily difficult for someone to actually get asylum now in the United States if they're arriving at the southern border. What happens when someone arrives at that border is they initially go to the port of entry, and most of the time they'll be told you need to get a number. That number is actually not maintained by the United States. These are lists that are maintained by the migrants themselves all along the southern border. So at the different ports of entry, the lists are maintained in a slightly different way, but the general idea is you get a number from whoever's maintaining the list, you wait until your number's called, which could be anywhere from 3 weeks until several months, and then once your number is called, then you would actually present yourself at the entrance. And if you're placed into the Migrant Protection Protocols, you're essentially just given a piece of paper that says, come back on this date in the future, and you'll be able to have your case heard by a judge. When a migrant comes to the border and they're placed into the Migrant Protection Protocol program, the MPP program, they're going to be sent right back to Mexico and told to wait until their court hearing comes. Right now, all the court hearings for the MPP program are on pause and hold because of the pandemic. So all those migrants and refugees continue to wait along the southern border. And the southern border that we have with Mexico is extraordinarily dangerous. It is marked by corruption, international gangs, drug trafficking organizations, and the migrants themselves are targeted because they're very vulnerable. They have no real recourse to go anywhere, and they're constantly the target of attacks and specifically kidnapping. So many migrants are kidnapped as they're waiting for their hearing in the United States. And in fact, I think the State Department says, the warnings from the State Department says any U.S. citizen should not be going to these places. I've been to the southern border since the end of 2018 until the beginning of 2020, probably 10 different times, going there to volunteer to help the migrants, explain to them what asylum is, represent some of these migrants in the MPP courts, and the situation there with the cartels, crime, corruption by the state police in Mexico, by the local police in Mexico is rampant, and it's an extraordinarily dangerous place to be, especially for children. So, like, who are these migrants? These migrants, for the most part, those who are coming from third-party countries that I've interacted with tend to be families with children, and they themselves are escaping something horrendous from the country that they came from. Other family members being murdered, kidnapped, every horrible thing you can imagine that happens between human beings is generally what caused them to leave their entire life to come to the United States seeking protection. And so, sometimes people say, why don't they just get protection in Mexico? You really don't have that protection in Mexico. Mexico doesn't have the ability to protect these migrants. I think they may not even have the ability to protect their own citizens, let alone the influx of migrants that are there. And there's a lot of corruption along the border. There's a lot of cartel influence, and there's a lot of crime. And these migrants tend to be the victims. So earlier I said that the migrant, when they only cross into the United States for their actual hearing. And when they come into the United States, their hearing, sometimes it's in an actual immigration court. So for instance, in Southern California, Tijuana area, the migrants are actually bused from the border to the immigration courts in San Diego, where they have their hearing, and then they're bused back the same day. In other parts of the border, the less populous areas like the Brownsville-Matamoros crossing, there is no physical immigration court that's close enough, so they constructed these tent courts right there at the crossing, and the migrant comes across for the day or half the day to go have their case heard in the tent court, and then they go back. And it's a very interesting thing because who's gone there for the day because immigration, they take away their shoelaces because I guess they think that the migrants are going to hang themselves or something. So every day you see a stream of people walking back without shoelaces, and you know that day they have their tent court hearing. It's just a very strange procedure that they have going there in these tent courts. A lot in these tent courts as well. They're kind of run by private organizations. I know on one of my cases, it was one of the very first tent court hearings in Brownsville. And we were not given any access to our client at all. We weren't allowed to speak to them. We weren't allowed to see them before the hearing. When we finally got in front of the judge, who wasn't even there, he was on video at a remote location. We asked the judge if we could talk to our client privately before we start the hearing, and the judge told us that he couldn't. He had no control over that we'd had to ask the private security firm that ran the actual tent courts to see if they would give us permission to speak with our client before the hearing, and they actually said no. And at that point, it becomes a question of what kind of a system is this, where the judge defers to a private security firm, and they're not even allowing us to speak with the client prior to their asylum hearing. I think this election is extraordinarily important because the right way of immigrating to the United States has been closed off. And so a lot of times I hear people say, why don't they just do it the right way? These people who have presented themselves at the border, at a port of entry, asking for help because they've been persecuted in their own country, are trying to do it the right way. But this administration has completely shut off that. We're not talking about illegal immigration here. We're talking about international laws that protect human beings, and these are human rights. And if you believe in doing things the right way, then I think you should go out there and vote because this is extraordinarily important.